Tasha was getting Aaliyah ready for bed, going through the familiar routine of toothbrushing and pajamas and one more story when the knock came. Not a polite tap, not the gentle rap of a neighbor borrowing sugar. This was heavy, urgent pounding that made the whole door shudder in its frame and sent her heart leaping into her throat. Aaliyah's eyes went wide. "Mama." "It's okay, baby. Stay here." Tasha grabbed the baseball bat she kept in the hall closet, a relic from a relationship that had ended badly, and approached the door with her pulse hammering in her ears. She checked the peephole and her breath caught. Mr. Kim stood on her porch and he looked like he'd walked through hell to get there. His usually immaculate suit was torn and dirty, one sleeve nearly ripped off. His hair, normally slicked back with precision, hung in sweat-dampened strands across his forehead. One hand was pressed against the doorframe for support, and in the yellow glow of the porch light, she could see the dark stains spreading across his crisp white shirt beneath his open blazer. Blood. A lot of it. "Warm welcome to Afro-Korean Heart. Would love to know where in the world you are watching from. Kindly listen till the end of the story, you will be stunned." Tasha Blackhawk had learned early that Vermilion Gulch wasn't the kind of place where heroes were born. It was the kind of place where people kept their heads down, their mouths shut, and their business to themselves. The town had a way of punishing curiosity, and Tasha had survived 28 years by respecting that unspoken rule. She'd grown up in the Oklahoma foster system, bouncing between homes that ranged from indifferent to cruel, and she'd clawed her way to something resembling stability through sheer determination. Her apartment wasn't much, a 2-bedroom rental on the wrong side of town with pipes that groaned in winter and air conditioning that wheezed in summer, but it was hers. The walls were covered with Aaliyah's artwork, bright crayon drawings that transformed the faded beige into something hopeful. Her daughter's laugh could fill every corner of those small rooms, and that made it a palace as far as Tasha was concerned. Working at Maggie's diner wasn't glamorous. Her feet ached perpetually, her lower back had developed a constant throb from years of carrying heavy trays, and the smell of fryer grease had permanently embedded itself into her hair. But the tips were decent. Maggie didn't ask questions about her past, and the regulars had become something like family. Old Mr. Peterson always left exactly $3.25, no matter what he ordered. The Ramirez construction crew came in every Thursday, loud and joking, filling the place with the kind of warm chaos that made the day go faster. Betty Thornton, the librarian, would sit in booth 7 with her romance novels and her Earl Grey tea, occasionally looking up to share a knowing smile with Tasha when the lunch rush got particularly absurd. This was Tasha's life. Small, predictable, safe, and she'd fought too hard for safety to risk it on anything as foolish as heroism. But on a Tuesday afternoon in late September, when the Oklahoma sun hung low and lazy over Henderson Park, when the heat shimmered off the asphalt in waves that made the whole world look like it was melting, Tasha broke her own code. She was cutting through the park on her way home from her shift, her feet screaming in her worn sneakers, her tips weighing down her apron pocket with the satisfying jingle of coins and crumpled bills. The park was mostly empty at this hour. The playground equipment stood abandoned, the swings swaying gently in the hot breeze. A sprinkler system sputtered to life somewhere in the distance, and Tasha could smell freshly cut grass mixed with the dusty scent of late summer. That's when she heard it. A small, frustrated sound. Half whimper, half growl. The kind of noise that spoke of embarrassment and desperation in equal measure. Tasha slowed, her mother's instinct flaring before her common sense could smother it. She knew she should keep walking. In Vermilion Gulch, you didn't get involved in things that weren't your concern. You didn't ask questions. You didn't make waves. But her feet had already changed direction, carrying her toward the source of the sound before her brain could overrule them. The girl was maybe 9 or 10 years old, trapped where the smooth concrete path gave way to overgrown brush and cracked earth. Her wheelchair had lurched into a deep rut, one wheel spinning uselessly in the air while the other remained stuck in a tangle of roots and dried grass. The child's delicate hands gripped the armrests, knuckles white with effort and embarrassment. She wore an expensive-looking dress, something with intricate lace trim and pearl buttons that didn't belong in a place like Henderson Park. Her long black hair fell in a sleek curtain that half hid her face, but Tasha could see the frustration glittering in her dark eyes, could see the way her small shoulders had hunched with defeat. The wheelchair itself was clearly top of the line, all chrome and ergonomic design, probably worth more than Tasha's car. But all the engineering in the world couldn't help when nature conspired against you. "Hey, sweetheart," Tasha called softly, approaching slowly with her hands visible. She'd learned from Aaliyah that sudden movements could startle children, especially ones who looked as fragile as this girl did. "Looks like you got yourself stuck. Mind if I help?" The girl's head snapped up, dark eyes wide with a mixture of hope and wariness. She studied Tasha for a long moment, taking in the diner uniform with its coffee stains and the name tag that read Tasha in cheerful red letters. Something in the girl's expression suggested she was used to measuring people, used to determining threats. Finally, she nodded once. A small, precise movement. Tasha grabbed the handles of the wheelchair and pulled, muscles straining. The chair didn't budge. She adjusted her grip, planted her feet more firmly and pulled again. This time she felt something give. The roots released their grip with a sound like tearing fabric, and suddenly the wheels found purchase on solid ground again. The chair rolled backward so quickly that Tasha almost lost her balance, but she managed to steady both herself and the girl. The girl exhaled sharply, relief flooding her delicate features. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice carrying the faintest accent, something musical and precise that Tasha couldn't quite place. "I thought I would be here until dark." "Where's your family?" Tasha asked, scanning the empty park. The shadows were already growing longer, stretching across the grass like grasping fingers. It wasn't safe for a child to be out here alone, especially not one as vulnerable as this. Vermilion Gulch might be small, but it had its share of problems. Drugs had crept in from the highway. Desperate people did desperate things. And a child in an expensive wheelchair, alone and helpless, would be an easy target. The girl's face shuddered, warmth replaced by something careful and practiced. "My father had business. He will return." Something in Tasha's chest twisted painfully. She thought of her own daughter, Aaliyah, waiting at home with homework spread across the kitchen table and questions about what was for dinner. She thought of all the ways the world could hurt a child left alone, all the predators that circled vulnerable prey. She thought of the newspaper articles she'd seen, the stories that started with a child alone and ended with tragedy. "Tell you what," Tasha said, making a decision that would unravel her entire life thread by thread. "There's a diner just 2 blocks from here. Best grilled cheese in the county, and I happen to know the cook real well. You come with me, get something warm in your belly, and when your dad comes looking, he'll find you safe and fed. Sound good?" The girl hesitated, and Tasha could see the internal debate playing out across her features. Stranger danger versus the alternative of sitting alone in an increasingly empty park. Finally, the girl's practical side won out. "My name is Soo-Jin," she said, pronouncing each syllable carefully. "I'm Tasha. Let's get you out of this heat, Soo-Jin." The walk to Maggie's diner was slow but companionable. Tasha pushed the wheelchair carefully, avoiding cracks and bumps, while Soo-Jin kept her hands folded primly in her lap. They didn't talk much, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. Tasha pointed out landmarks as they went, the painted mural on the library wall, the oak tree that was supposedly 200 years old, the corner store where Mr. Chin would give kids free candy if they brought him their report cards. Soo-Jin absorbed it all with quiet intensity, as if she were memorizing a map to a foreign country. Maggie's Diner was the kind of place that existed in every small town across America, all checkered floors and vinyl booths and the smell of coffee that had been brewing since dawn. The walls were covered with local memorabilia, faded photographs of Vermilion Gulch's glory days, high school football trophies from the 70s, a signed picture of some country singer who'd supposedly stopped through in 1983. The jukebox in the corner still worked, though it only played songs from before 1995, and the ceiling fan wobbled dangerously every time someone slammed a door too hard. It was almost empty at this hour, the dinner rush still an hour away. Maggie herself was in the back, prepping for the evening crowd, and the only other customer was old Tom, nursing his usual whiskey and coffee combo in the corner booth while he worked on the crossword puzzle he never quite finished. Tasha settled Soo-Jin at her favorite corner booth, the one with the view of the street and the least amount of duct tape on the seats, and disappeared into the kitchen. The familiar chaos of the prep area was comforting, the sizzle of the griddle, the clatter of pots, Maggie's off-key humming to whatever was playing on her ancient radio. Tasha worked quickly, grilling cheese with the kind of precision that came from years of practice. She cut the sandwich into perfect triangles, added a handful of crispy fries still hot from the fryer, and topped it off with a chocolate milkshake thick enough to stand a spoon in. When she emerged, balancing the plate and glass with practiced ease, she found Soo-Jin staring out the window with an expression of such profound loneliness that Tasha's heart clenched. "Here you go, honey," Tasha said gently, sliding the plate across the table. "Careful, the cheese is hot." Soo-Jin looked down at the food with wonder. She picked up a triangle with careful, deliberate movements, blew on it to cool it down and took a small bite. Her eyes widened. "This is really good," she said, and there was genuine surprise in her voice. "Told you Maggie makes the best grilled cheese in the county," Tasha said, sliding into the booth across from her. "Take your time. Your dad knows where to find us." Soo-Jin ate with the careful manners of someone who'd been taught that meals were ceremonies, that every movement at the table was subject to judgment. But beneath the politeness there was genuine hunger. Not the hunger of someone who'd missed a meal, but the hunger of someone who rarely got to eat something made with simple, uncomplicated kindness. Between bites she talked. Small things at first, tentative offerings of information. She liked drawing, particularly portraits. She missed Seoul, the way the city lights reflected off the Han River at night. She was homeschooled because her father worried about her safety, about the other children being too rough, too careless. "My dad says the world is too loud for me," Soo-Jin whispered, swirling her straw through the melting ice cream. "He says people would hurt me if they knew I couldn't run away. He says I have to be careful because there are bad people everywhere." Tasha's throat tightened. She recognized that kind of protective isolation, having seen it before in children whose parents wrapped them in so much bubble wrap that they could barely breathe. She understood the impulse. God knew she had her own moments of wanting to lock Aaliyah away from every possible danger, but she also knew the cost of that kind of protection. "Well, your dad sounds like he loves you very much," Tasha said carefully. "But you know what? Some of the loudest people I know have the biggest hearts. Don't let anyone make you feel small, baby girl. You've got just as much right to take up space in this world as anybody else." For the first time in what looked like years, Soo-Jin laughed. It was a bright, clear sound that rang through the diner like a bell, pure and unexpected. Old Tom looked up from his crossword and smiled despite himself. Even Maggie poked her head out of the kitchen to see what had caused such a joyful noise. That's when he walked in. Mr. Kim didn't enter the room so much as he altered its gravity. The very air seemed to shift when he crossed the threshold, becoming heavier somehow. He was tall for a Korean man, easily 6 feet, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Tasha made in 3 months. The fabric had that particular sheen that only came with serious money, and it fit him with the precision of custom tailoring. His face was handsome in a severe way, all sharp angles and controlled emotion, with eyes that missed nothing and revealed less. But when those eyes found Soo-Jin, something in them softened just for a moment, just enough to show the father beneath the facade. "Papa," Soo-Jin called, waving with uncharacteristic enthusiasm. He approached the table with measured steps, each footfall precise and deliberate. His gaze swept over Tasha in a single assessing glance, taking in everything from her stained uniform to her worn shoes to the defensive way she'd straightened her spine when he entered. She felt evaluated and catalogued in that moment, filed away in whatever mental database he maintained. "Soo-Jin," he said quietly, and his voice was like expensive whiskey, smooth and dark. "I was worried. This is Miss Tasha, Papa. She helped me when my chair got stuck in the park, and she made me the best grilled cheese I've ever had. Look, I ate almost all of it." Mr. Kim's attention shifted fully to Tasha, and she felt the weight of it like a physical thing, like standing too close to a fire. His expression was unreadable, but something flickered in his eyes. Calculation maybe. Or concern. Perhaps both. He reached into his jacket, and for one wild, irrational moment, Tasha wondered if she should be afraid. Her mind conjured images from movies, men in expensive suits pulling out guns in diners, the casual violence of organized crime. But he only pulled out a wallet, thick black leather that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and extracted a crisp $100 bill. He placed it on the table between them with the kind of care most people reserved for signing legal documents. "For the meal," he said. "And for your kindness to my daughter. Keep the change." "Sir, that's way too much," Tasha started, but he raised a hand, cutting her off with a gesture that was somehow both polite and absolute. "You shouldn't have involved yourself," he said softly, and something in his tone made the hair on the back of Tasha's neck stand up. It wasn't quite a threat, not exactly, but it wasn't gratitude either. It sounded like a warning wrapped in silk, like a man trying to tell her something important without actually saying the words. "But since you did, please accept this with my thanks." But Tasha, who had spent her entire life reading between the lines of what people said, who had survived the foster system by learning to interpret tone and body language, somehow misread this moment completely. She thought she saw embarrassment in his eyes, the discomfort of a wealthy man whose daughter had been found eating diner food with a stranger. She thought she understood his stiffness as the awkwardness of someone unused to accepting help, particularly from someone in her social position. She smiled, trying to ease the tension in the air. "It was no trouble at all, Mr. Kim. She's a wonderful girl. You've raised her well." Something complicated crossed his face, too quick for Tasha to interpret. He looked down at his daughter, and his expression softened into something almost painful in its tenderness. "Come, Soo-Jin," he said. "We should go." As they left, Soo-Jin twisted in her wheelchair to wave goodbye, her small face lit with happiness that transformed her from a careful, controlled child into something radiant. Tasha waved back, tucking the 100 into her apron and already mentally allocating it. 50 toward the electric bill. 30 for groceries. 20 for Aaliyah's field trip fund. She watched them through the window as Mr. Kim loaded Soo-Jin into a black sedan that had been idling at the curb, all tinted windows and expensive chrome. She watched them drive away, leaving nothing behind but a $100 bill and the lingering scent of expensive cologne. Tasha had no idea that she'd just painted a target on her back. Had no idea that in the shadows across the street, men in another black sedan were already making phone calls, already reporting back to people who measured kindness as weakness and saw every connection as a potential vulnerability to exploit. She had no idea that her life and Aaliyah's life would never be the same. The girls became inseparable over the next 3 weeks, and watching their friendship blossom was like watching something impossible and inevitable all at once. It started innocently enough. Mr. Kim brought Soo-Jin to the diner 2 days later, at an odd hour between lunch and dinner when the place was nearly empty. He sat in a booth by the window, nursing a cup of black coffee he barely touched, while Soo-Jin wheeled herself over to where Tasha was wiping down tables. "Miss Tasha," she said shyly, "I was wondering if you had time to talk?" And Tasha, who should have known better, who should have recognized the warning signs, pulled up a chair and talked. They discussed books Soo-Jin was reading, advanced stuff that made Tasha feel slightly inadequate but also impressed. They talked about art, and Soo-Jin showed her sketches on her tablet, portraits so lifelike they seemed ready to speak. They talked about everything and nothing, and by the time Mr. Kim stood to leave, Tasha realized an hour had passed. "Same time Thursday?" Soo-Jin asked hopefully. Tasha glanced at Mr. Kim, who gave a small nod. "Same time Thursday," Tasha confirmed. That's when she made the mistake that would change everything. "You know," Tasha said, "I have a daughter about your age. Leah. She's at school right now, but if you ever want to meet her, I think you two would get along great." Soo-Jin's entire face lit up. "Really? I've never had a friend my age before." Mr. Kim's expression flickered, something dark passing through his eyes. But Soo-Jin was already begging, already pleading with the desperate intensity of a child who'd been isolated too long, and Tasha watched him crumble in the face of his daughter's longing. "Perhaps briefly," he said, each word careful. "If Miss Blackhawk is certain she doesn't mind." That Saturday, Tasha brought Aaliyah to the diner during her shift. Her daughter was a whirlwind of energy and opinions, all wild curls and gap-toothed smiles and an endless stream of chatter about everything from her favorite cartoon to the frog she'd found in the backyard. She burst into the diner like a small tornado and stopped short when she saw Soo-Jin. "Hi," Aaliyah said, tilting her head. "My mom says you need a friend. I'm pretty good at being a friend. Wanna see?" And just like that, without any of the careful negotiation of adults, the two girls clicked. Aaliyah pulled up a chair next to Soo-Jin's wheelchair and immediately launched into a detailed explanation of her current favorite game, some elaborate pretend scenario involving dragons and princesses and a magic sword she'd fashioned from a cardboard tube. Soo-Jin listened with rapt attention, asking questions, adding suggestions, and within minutes they were deep in the kind of imaginative play that knew no boundaries. Over the following weeks, Tasha would watch them in that corner booth. Aaliyah's nimble fingers teaching Soo-Jin how to braid hair, both of them giggling over shared secrets and whispered jokes. She watched Aaliyah draw Soo-Jin into her world with effortless generosity, never once acknowledging the wheelchair as a limitation. She watched Soo-Jin blossom under Aaliyah's unquestioning acceptance, saw her laugh more freely, speak more boldly, take up more space in the world. It was beautiful. It was pure. It was the kind of friendship that transcended circumstance and social boundaries and all the artificial divisions that adults imposed on the world. It was also a death sentence. Tasha didn't notice the shadows at first. They were subtle, professional, the kind of surveillance that was meant to go unnoticed. A black sedan that seemed to park on her street a little too often, always just far enough away to avoid attention but close enough to maintain a clear line of sight to her building. A man in sunglasses who nursed the same cup of coffee for 3 hours at the diner across the street, watching through the window with the kind of patience that spoke of training and purpose. Phone calls that disconnected the moment she answered, leaving only the echo of breathing on the line. Tasha told herself she was being paranoid, that the foster system had made her jumpy, prone to seeing threats where none existed, that she was safe here in Vermilion Gulch, in her small life with her daughter and her diner shifts and her carefully constructed normalcy. Then the problems started and paranoia became reality. Her credit card was declined at the grocery store. Tasha stood at the register with a week's worth of food on the conveyor belt and her face burning with embarrassment as the cashier ran the card again. Declined. She tried her debit card. Also declined. There must be some mistake, Tasha said, her voice shaking slightly. Can I call the bank? She stepped aside, letting the annoyed customers behind her proceed, and dialed the number on the back of her card. After navigating an automated menu that seemed designed to frustrate, she finally reached a human being. Your account has been flagged for suspicious activity, the representative said in a bored monotone. It's been frozen pending investigation. What suspicious activity? I haven't used it for anything unusual. I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't have access to those details. You'll need to wait for the investigation to conclude. It could take 7 to 10 business days. 7 to 10 days. Tasha looked at the cart of groceries, at the milk and bread and chicken that Aaliyah needed for the week, and felt panic rising in her chest. She had maybe $40 in cash. That was it. She bought milk, bread, and peanut butter and walked home with a growing sense of dread. 2 days later, her landlord knocked on her door. Leonard Hutchins was usually a genial man, a retired accountant who'd inherited the building from his father and ran it with benign neglect. But today his face was pale, his hands shaking slightly as he held out an eviction notice. 3 days, Tasha, he said, refusing to meet her eyes. I'm sorry, but you need to be out. What? The word came out as a strangled sound. Why? Leonard, I've never been late on rent, not once in 4 years. What's going on? It's not negotiable. His hands were shaking harder now, and she realized with a shock that he was scared. Genuinely terrified. Just go. Please. I can't. I just need you to go. Leonard, I have a daughter. I have a job. I can't just leave in 3 days. Where am I supposed to go? I'm sorry, he said again, and there was real anguish in his voice. I'm so sorry, Tasha. But you have to understand, I don't have a choice. They made it very clear that I don't have a choice. Who made it clear? But Leonard was already backing away, practically fleeing down the hallway like something was chasing him. The eviction notice fluttered in Tasha's hands, official and merciless, and she felt the first real spike of genuine fear. This wasn't random. Someone was systematically dismantling her life, piece by piece. But who? And why? She thought of the black sedan, the watching man, the disconnected phone calls. She thought of Mr. Kim's warning that first day at the diner. You shouldn't have involved yourself. And she began to understand. Tasha spent the next 2 days in a haze of panic and planning. She called in sick to work, which she'd never done before, and spent hours on the phone trying to find a new apartment, trying to explain to banks why her accounts had been frozen, trying to hold together a life that was crumbling like wet sand between her fingers. Aaliyah could sense something was wrong and had grown quiet and clingy, following Tasha from room to room with worried eyes. "Mama, are we in trouble?" she asked on the 3rd night. "No, baby," Tasha lied, smoothing back her daughter's wild curls. Everything's going to be fine. We might just need to move soon, that's all. An adventure. Aaliyah didn't look convinced, but she nodded and went to bed. Tasha sat in the darkness of her living room, staring at the eviction notice, at the bank statements she'd printed out showing her frozen accounts, at the stack of bills she had no way to pay. He thought about running. Just grabbing Aaliyah and whatever they could carry and disappearing into the night. She'd done it before as a teenager aging out of the foster system. She knew how to vanish. But running meant leaving behind everything she'd built. Her job. Her friends. The small community she'd carved out in Vermilion Gulch. It meant uprooting Aaliyah from her school, from her life. And it meant admitting defeat to whoever was doing this to her. Tasha Blackhawk had never been good at admitting defeat. The answer came bleeding and desperate to her door 3 nights later. Tasha was getting Aaliyah ready for bed, going through the familiar routine of toothbrushing and pajamas and one more story when the knock came. Not a polite tap, not the gentle rap of a neighbor borrowing sugar. This was heavy, urgent pounding that made the whole door shudder in its frame and sent her heart leaping into her throat. Aaliyah's eyes went wide. "Mama." "It's okay, baby. Stay here." Tasha grabbed the baseball bat she kept in the hall closet, a relic from a relationship that had ended badly, and approached the door with her pulse hammering in her ears. She checked the peephole and her breath caught. Mr. Kim stood on her porch and he looked like he'd walked through hell to get there. His usually immaculate suit was torn and dirty, one sleeve nearly ripped off. His hair, normally slicked back with precision, hung in sweat-dampened strands across his forehead. One hand was pressed against the doorframe for support, and in the yellow glow of the porch light, she could see the dark stains spreading across his crisp white shirt beneath his open blazer. Blood. A lot of it. Tasha yanked the door open, the bat clattering to the floor. "Oh my God." "Inside," he rasped, his voice rough with pain. "Quickly." She didn't think, just reacted. She grabbed his arm and pulled him through the door, her mind already racing through what she knew about first aid. It wasn't much, just a course she'd taken years ago for a job at a nursing home, but she remembered the basics. Pressure. Elevation. Clean the wound. Stop the bleeding. Mr. Kim slumped against her worn sofa, leaving a smear of blood on the faded fabric. Up close she could see more damage. Bruises blooming across his jaw. A cut above his eyebrow. His knuckles split and raw. "Aaliyah, baby, go to your room and close the door," Tasha called, trying to keep her voice steady and failing. "But Mama." "Now, baby. Please. It's very important." She heard Aaliyah's door click shut, then ran to the bathroom for her first aid kit and every clean towel she owned. When she returned, Mr. Kim had peeled off his jacket and was trying to unbutton his shirt with trembling fingers. "Let me," Tasha said, kneeling beside him. She unbuttoned the shirt carefully, peeling back the blood-soaked fabric to reveal the wound beneath. It was a knife wound, she realized with a sick lurch of her stomach. A long, shallow cut along his ribs, maybe 6 inches long. It had bled copiously but didn't look deep enough to have hit anything vital. Still, it needed stitches. Probably antibiotics. Definitely professional medical attention. "You need a hospital," she said. "No hospitals." His voice was iron despite his pallor, despite the way his breathing had gone shallow and fast. "They'll be watching. Just clean it. Please." Tasha worked in silence, her hands surprisingly steady given the circumstances. She cleaned the wound with antiseptic that made him hiss through his teeth. She applied pressure until the bleeding slowed to a sleep. She bandaged it as best she could with butterfly closures and gauze, layering it the way she'd been taught, trying not to think about infection or complications or the fact that she was performing emergency medicine in her living room. When she'd finished, she sat back on her heels and looked at him. Really looked at him. Beneath the expensive suits and the controlled exterior, he was just a man. A hurt, exhausted man with eyes that had seen too much violence. "Why are you here?" she asked quietly. Mr. Kim leaned his head back against the sofa, staring at the ceiling. For a long moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he started talking and Tasha felt her entire world shift. "I tried to keep you as a ghost in my life," he said, each word deliberate and heavy. "A good deed. A kind stranger. Nothing more. I thought if I kept it contained, if I limited our interactions, they wouldn't notice. Wouldn't care. But my rivals don't see kindness, Miss Blackhawk. They see a lever. A pressure point. They think I'm soft because I let you near my daughter. I don't understand. I am the head of the Kim clan, he said, and his eyes met hers now, dark and unflinching. A Korean syndicate operating in 17 states. We move money. We move products. We handle problems for people who can't go through official channels. I've done things that would make you sick to hear about, things I can never atone for. Tasha's mouth had gone dry. The room seemed to tilt around her. I came to Vermilion Gulch 3 years ago to go legitimate, he continued, his voice taking on a note of something like regret. To give Soo-Jin a life away from the blood, away from the constant threat. I've been slowly extracting myself from the business, transferring control, trying to become just another rich businessman with a tragic past. But the commission doesn't accept resignations. They don't let people just walk away, especially not people who know as much as I do. The commission? The ruling body of the major syndicates. Korean, Chinese, Russian, Italian. We're supposed to keep the peace, maintain territories, and prevent wars. But there's a faction that wants me gone. They see my attempt to go straight as weakness, as betrayal. And now they've sent a cleaner to settle my debts and remove my distractions. He gestured vaguely at the wound in his side. This was the 3rd attempt this week. The first 2 I managed to avoid. This one got closer. Tasha stood up, her legs unsteady. She walked to the window and looked out at her quiet street. The black sedan was still there, parked under a broken streetlight. She could see the glow of cigarettes in the darkness, the silhouettes of men waiting. The frozen accounts, she said numbly. The eviction. Them testing me. Seeing if I'll protect you. Seeing if you matter enough to risk exposure. Mr. Kim's voice had gone hoarse. And tonight when I came here bleeding on your doorstep, I confirmed what they suspected. Tasha's phone buzzed on the coffee table, the sound abnormally loud in the tense silence. She picked it up with numb fingers. Unknown number. Video message. She tapped play and the world stopped. The footage was crystal clear despite being shot from a distance. Professional-grade surveillance equipment. The timestamp showed today 3:47 p.m. Aaliyah walking home from school, her purple backpack bouncing with each step, her wild curls catching the afternoon sun. She was humming something. Tasha could see her daughter's lips moving even without sound, completely unaware of the lens trained on her. Then the crosshair appeared. A red targeting reticle, perfectly centered on Aaliyah's small back, tracking her movement with mechanical precision as she walked. The video followed her for 5 seconds, the crosshair never wavering, and then it ended. The message was clear. We can reach your daughter anytime we want. The phone slipped from Tasha's fingers and clattered on the floor. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The room had started spinning and she grabbed the back of a chair to keep from falling. If you stay, Mr. Kim said, and his voice was breaking now, the careful control finally shattering, they kill us all. Leah. Soo-Jin. Everyone you've ever smiled at in this town. They'll burn Vermilion Gulch to the ground just to prove a point about what happens when someone makes me care. He leaned forward, pain etched in every line of his face, urgency cutting through his exhaustion. But if you run, if you disappear tonight, I can distract them long enough for you to get clear. New city. New names. I have contacts who can help, people who owe me favors. You'll have money, protection, documentation. A chance. But you can never see Soo-Jin again. You can never come back here. You have to become someone else. Through the window, Tasha could see the black sedan. Could see the men inside shifting, getting ready. How long did she have? An hour? Less? What about you? She whispered. What about Soo-Jin? I've lived this life long enough to know how it ends, he said, and there was a terrible peace in his voice. But my daughter deserves better. I was a fool to think I could have both worlds, that I could keep her safe while keeping ties to the business. This is my fault. My arrogance. And I'll pay for it. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket, thick with cash and documents. There's $50,000 in here. New identities for you and Aaliyah. An address in Montana where someone will meet you and set you up. You have maybe 6 hours before they move. Maybe less. Please, Miss Blackhawk. Save your daughter. Don't let her pay for my sins. Tasha looked at the envelope in his outstretched hand. She looked at the photo of Aaliyah on the mantel, her gap-toothed smile frozen in a moment of pure, uncomplicated joy. She thought of the video of that red crosshair centered on her daughter's small back. She thought of Soo-Jin sitting in that corner booth just weeks ago, laughing for the first time in years because someone had shown her that the world could be kind. She thought of braided hair and chocolate milkshakes and the way two little girls from completely different universes had found each other in the space between French fries and shared dreams. She thought of Aaliyah's voice explaining dragons to Soo-Jin with absolute authority. She thought of Soo-Jin's careful sketches of the two of them as princesses, saved in her tablet like treasures. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Tasha took the envelope with trembling hands. "I need to know something first," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "Why did you let it happen? Why did you let Soo-Jin come to the diner? Why didn't you stop it from the beginning?" Mr. Kim's eyes glistened in the lamplight. "Because for 3 years I've watched my daughter exist in a cage I built for her. A golden cage, yes, with the best tutors and the finest things, but a cage nonetheless. And then one day I found her stuck in a park and a stranger helped her. A stranger who didn't see dollar signs or opportunities. Just a child who needed help." He paused, swallowing hard. "And then I saw her laugh. Really laugh. For the first time since her mother died. How could I take that away from her? How could I deny her the one pure good thing in her life? I thought I could manage it. Control it. I was wrong." Tasha stood up, her decision made. She walked to Aaliyah's room and opened the door. Her daughter was sitting on her bed, still fully dressed, eyes wide and scared. "Baby, we need to pack," Tasha said gently. "Right now. We're going on a trip." "Is it because of the bad men?" Aaliyah asked, and Tasha's heart broke at the matter-of-fact fear in her voice. "Yes, baby. But Mama's going to keep you safe. I promise." They moved quickly. Tasha had learned early in life to keep a go-bag ready, a habit from her foster care days. She grabbed it from the closet, checked the contents with practiced efficiency. Important documents. Basic supplies. She added Aaliyah's favorite stuffed rabbit, a few changes of clothes, the photo album with pictures of them both. In 20 minutes they were ready. Mr. Kim had moved to the window, watching the street with the focused intensity of a predator. "They're getting restless," he said quietly. "Another car just pulled up. You need to go now." "The back door," Tasha said. "Through the alley to Mrs. Chen's yard. Her fence has a loose board. From there we can get to the main street without being seen." Mr. Kim nodded. He pulled a phone from his pocket, a burner by the look of it, and handed it to her. "There's one number programmed in. Once you're clear of town, call it. They'll guide you the rest of the way." Tasha took the phone, then hesitated. "What do I tell Aaliyah about Soo-Jin?" "Tell her the truth," Mr. Kim said. "That sometimes people who love each other have to be apart to keep each other safe. That friendship doesn't end just because you can't see someone. That she gave Soo-Jin something precious, and Soo-Jin will carry that with her forever." "Will you tell her about me? About us?" "Every day," he promised. "I'll tell her about the brave woman who saved her from a park and taught her that kindness exists. I'll tell her about the little girl with wild curls who showed her how to laugh again. And when she's older, when this is over, I'll tell her the whole truth. She deserves to know that good people exist, even in a world like mine." Tasha reached out and squeezed his hand. "Get out of this life," she said fiercely. "For real this time. That little girl deserves her father alive and free. Promise me." "I promise," he said, and she believed him. Tasha picked up their bags and took Aaliyah's hand. At the back door she paused and looked back. Mr. Kim stood in her living room, this stranger who'd crashed into her life and destroyed it and saved it all at once. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by pain and regret. "Thank you," she said, "for trying to protect us. For giving us a chance." He nodded once, sharp and final. "Go. And don't look back." Tasha slipped out into the night with her daughter, moving through shadows she'd memorized from years of late-night walks home from the diner. Behind them, Mr. Kim watched from the window as they disappeared into the darkness. Then he picked up his phone and made a call. "It's done," he said quietly. "They're clear. Now come and get me. Let's finish this." He walked to the front door, checking his weapon one last time. Outside, the black sedan's doors were opening. Men were emerging, silhouettes against the streetlights. Mr. Kim thought of his daughter's laughter, of braided hair and grilled cheese, and the strange, terrible mercy of a waitress who'd saved them both by showing them what kindness looked like. Then he opened the door and stepped out to meet his demons, buying time measured in bullets and blood, so that somewhere in the darkness, a mother and two daughters might have a chance at tomorrow. Tasha and Aaliyah ran through backyards and alleys, their breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind them they heard the first gunshots crack through the night air, sharp and final. Aaliyah whimpered and Tasha picked her up, running faster, her daughter's weight nothing compared to the weight of what they were leaving behind. They made it to the main street. Tasha flagged down a cab with shaking hands, gave an address 3 towns over, and collapsed into the back seat with Aaliyah clutched against her chest. As they pulled away from Vermilion Gulch, away from the only life Tasha had managed to build for herself, she pulled out the burner phone. Her thumb hovered over the call button. But before she could press it, the phone buzzed with an incoming text from an unknown number. Soo-Jin wanted you to have this. Below the text was an image. A drawing. Soo-Jin's careful, beautiful artwork showing 4 figures, 2 adults and 2 children, holding hands under a bright sun. In the corner, in precise handwriting, were the words, "My family. Even when we're apart." Tasha's vision blurred with tears. She held Aaliyah closer and whispered, "We're going to be okay, baby. We're going to be okay." The cab carried them into the night, toward Montana, toward new names and new lives. Behind them, Vermilion Gulch burned with the sound of violence and consequences. But ahead, somewhere in the darkness, was the possibility of safety. Of survival, of starting over. And maybe, just maybe, if Mr. Kim kept his promise and got out of that life, if Tasha and Aaliyah could stay hidden long enough, if the world was kinder than it had any right to be, maybe someday those 4 figures in Soo-Jin's drawing could hold hands for real. But that was a hope for tomorrow. Tonight was just about surviving until dawn. What happens next will leave you speechless. Does Mr. Kim survive the confrontation with the commission's cleaners? Does Tasha make it to Montana safely, or are they being followed even now? And what about Soo-Jin? Will she ever see Aaliyah again? The stakes have never been higher, and part 2 is going to answer all of these questions and more. Drop a comment below with where in the world you are watching from, your theories about what happens next. Do you think Mr. Kim has a plan, or is this really the end for him? Do you think the commission will let Tasha and Aaliyah go? And most importantly, will these 2 little girls ever get their happy ending? If this story grabbed you by the throat and wouldn't let go, smash that subscribe button right now. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss part 2, because I promise you what happens next will blow your mind. Share this with someone who loves intense storytelling, and let's build this community together. Your comments, your shares, your support, that's what keeps these stories coming. Let me hear from you in the comments. What was your favorite moment? What surprised you the most? I read every single comment, and your feedback makes me a better storyteller. See you in part 2. Now go hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next.